name's Tim Gordon.
I'm Steve Ferrell.
We are delivering to you a really cool program called Mindful Yoga-Based ACT, or Mindful Yoga-Based Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. This program actually originated back in 2012 when I was working on my master's thesis. I was a graduate student in the Faculty of Social Work, and I was really interested in combining the work that I had done using mindfulness with yoga. What occurred to me, Steve, actually when we first met, is I had had a physical injury, and that's how I came to yoga. Mm-hmm. And I found myself at a studio that you were teaching at, and I immediately really enjoyed the work that you were doing. How did you come to yoga?
I came to yoga through bodybuilding. Interestingly enough, when I was a kid, I was overweight for most of my young childhood, and then I got into weight training because I thought it was going to get me girls. So let's say that it was for self-esteem. And then, not that everybody knows what the life of a bodybuilder is like, but you basically walk around in pain all day. Your pain just migrates from your chest to your back, to your arms, to your legs. And it's pain that we ask for, so it's very self-inflicted. But that one day, my girlfriend at the time, who is my wife now, took me to my first yoga class. She says, I think this could really help you loosen up. And I took my first class with the woman who actually owns the studio that I used to work at.
No kidding.
That we met at. And as soon as we walked out of the class, I said to my wife, I leaned over and I said, I'm going to do this forever.
Oh, wow.
And it was just, I felt more aware in my body, and things felt good. And for a long time, I was actually like not in pain. And so, yeah, and that's how I found yoga.
That's incredible, because that's the same experience that I had, where I was essentially referred to a yoga class to work on a physical injury that I had. And something struck me about yoga, which was I had been a long-time meditator, had been meditating for, I think, almost a decade at that point. Mm-hmm. And I immediately experienced the benefits of what I would say was meditation. I mean, I also had a sense of relief from the pain, from the asana, the physical practice, but I also accessed that immediate benefit of meditation in the class. Mm-hmm. You know, left with that sort of very like centered, present, sort of, if I may, blissed out kind of feeling.
That was the same thing for me. I didn't notice it while I was in my first class because I was working really hard at like paying attention to how my body was moving, which was very meditative, and I'd done that in the weight training world in the past, but in a much more engaged way, in a much more mindful and attentive way, where I was not only just aware of like how I was lifting a weight and putting it down, but really being attentive to how I was breathing and how my breath was communicating to me. And then if we could call it blissful awareness, at the end of class was, for me, I felt taller, I felt like the sun was shining brighter, I felt like the birds were singing louder. Not that everybody knows where Hamilton, Ontario is, but I felt that the Hamilton, Ontario air smelled cleaner, which was probably not the case. I felt like I was more in my body than I had been in 20 some odd years.
That's incredible, Steve. Yeah. So this brings me to a really, I think, logical jump in our conversation, because so having been a practitioner of yoga, went to your classes, was really impressed with your work. And I'm not just saying that because you're my friend and because we, work together now. But I was very impressed with the work that you were doing. And it occurred to me when I was doing my master's thesis that I wanted to research yoga, because there was a real lack of literature at the time. Essentially, the mindfulness literature left out yoga completely. Yeah. And so that's what initially brought me to India. I spent some time there doing the primary investigation of my thesis there, and then recruiting participants. You and I worked together on that project as well.
I was very honored to be a part of.
Oh, that's so cool. And so making that jump from yoga as this experience, this meditative experience, to actually validating its use with people who are suffering. How did you start to make that jump?
For me, it was a lot of the work that I was doing in yoga, like I kind of said before, that the bodybuilding mentality overlaid on top of the yoga practice was actually kind of giving me more injuries. And so as a way to heal myself, I started to get more into the study of anatomy and biomechanics and things like that. And the one way that practice was asking me to work off of was to actually, from the biomechanical model, which is like, this is how a joint moves, this is how a bone moves in its socket or in its place in relationship to another bone, was to actually be able to put that into practice and feel that on my mat. Like, this is my leg bone rotating. How much can I actually do that to any given degree on any given day? When does that turn into another movement pattern? How does my breath communicate with me? So that really started to solidify when I began to work with some teachers in that realm. And then when we started to work together, I was also really interested in, like what you were saying, was that there was really not a lot of research being done about the efficacy of what yoga has to offer. And minus like a lot of, if we could use the term floofy language, there was a lot of floofy language, and there was definitely some shared experience, which is a big part of the way that yoga works. But there was really not a lot of data pointing towards why it worked and how it worked.
Yeah, a lot of pre and post test stuff, but not actually looking at the mechanisms of change.
Exactly.